Welcome back and thank you very much for staying with us tonight. Nigeria's power grid once again collapsed, making it the 12th time in 2024. The collapse is despite the Minister of Power promising the country would generate 6,000 megawatts of electricity by December. In a related development, wholesale gas producing companies have stopped the supply of natural gas to power generation companies for electricity production over the non-payment of debt accrued from previous supplies. The Chief Executive Officer of the Association of Power Generation Companies, Dr. Joy Ogaji, disclosed that the gas producing companies have formally notified all GENCOs of the suspension of natural gas supply. Tonight, let's speak with Mr. Bode Fadikwe, is the CEO of Sage Communications Limited, power sector policy analyst and advocate on this latest development and the overall assessment of the power sector. Mr. Fadikwe, good evening to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us on Politics Tonight.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, viewers.
Good evening to you. The last time we had a conversation was in February, so it's been 10 months. What's your assessment of the power sector in Nigeria? Has there been any improvement?
Unfortunately, there has not been. Sad to say and sad to note. I mean, just about 3 months ago, we were in a very serious turbulent situation where the entire north was cut off. I mean, northeast, northwest, we are cut off. It was only the north central that appeared to have some succor. That was a very, very unfortunate experience that for two clear weeks, almost extending into the third week, the entire north was out of power supply. You can imagine the hurt to that economy, the dislocation of people's life, so many things that would have happened, aiding of crime and all of those things. Not just that alone, we had series of grid system collapse that became very embarrassing because for me, all of a sudden, grid collapse became pure water that you could pick up at Oshodi and Maitu at any point in time or anywhere you are. You can just, at the snap of your finger, you can pick up pure water anywhere you are. So, I mean, even as at yesterday or thereabout, the grid still collapsed. And I think that was reflected in your report that we have had about 12 collapses in very short time. In those days, in the 80s, in the 90s, even the period preceding the privatization, grid collapse was not a common language because it was not a common event. But today, even the little boy out there knows what grid collapse is now because it has become so frequent and almost back to back that the grid network and the grid operations is like disco operations. It's so frequent. It's like the transformer on your street that is losing fuse now and again, or the wire in your street that is snapping now and again. And the grid is at a very high voltage. The grid is operating at 330,000 volts. No, I mean, at that voltage, you expect that everything will be perfected, everything will be in proper shape. But unfortunately, we have not seen that situation of perfection in the last few months. And it's disturbing enough because we don't really know where the sector is going to now. And one of the fundamental things that you raised in your report is the issue of the gas, where the gas
suppliers... Before we come to that, Mr. Fadikwe, unfortunately also, Nigerians have consistently asked Minister Adelabu for the reasons behind the collapse of the national grid. He says the grid is over 50 years old, with components that were weak and dilapidated, including the lines and substations with old transformers. He also said they need continuous maintenance. First, do you agree with that? In addressing the issue of maintenance of power structure, how well will you say this is being done?
Now, you see, if the Honorable Minister of Power, Chief Bayo Adelabu, has come out to say that we are operating an obsolete grid or aged grid, I feel extremely embarrassed and ashamed. It may be the truth, and I want to take him for his words. I want to give him the benefit of doubt that what he said is the truth. But it's an embarrassing and a shameful truth. Now, why am I saying so? Since we came back to civil rule, government has consistently budgeted money for the power sector. Apart from defense, for obvious reasons, security and co, the next sector that has taken the highest amount of money is not education, is not works, is not health, is not science and technology, is not trade and industry. That sector is the power sector. Go and do your audit. Do your audit of the Federation's accounts. Do your audit of the yearly budget. Particularly post-privatization period, government has spent over 6 trillion for the power sector. How much has gone into the transmission company of Nigeria that is the the managers of the grid? So if the minister is coming out to say our grid is obsolete, our grid is dilapidated, our grid is populated by old equipment, I am ashamed, I am embarrassed. What have we been doing with the money? What have we been doing with the World Bank facilities that we have been receiving? The facilities from African Development Bank and several other lending institutions. What have we done with the Siemens project? That by now, the minister should be telling us that we have a brand new grid. And I give you another example. For instance, SCADA has been on the drawing board. We have been trying to achieve SCADA, which is a major equipment in the transmission grid. In the grid. We have been trying to achieve it for 40 years. We have not been able to do it. The Yoruba culture that I belong to says that when you use 20 years to prepare for madness, for how long are you going to be mad? If for 40 years we have been pursuing the installation of SCADA, which is a data acquisition equipment, so that you can see exactly the way the grid is performing at any point in time. For 40 years, that's around 1984. Till date, we have not been able to achieve it. Mambila project, power station, for 30 years we were pursuing it. What has been happening to the budget? Nobody's asking questions. Nobody wants to answer questions. So unless we are ready to radically turn around the issue of the power sector, we'll continue to have this kind of epileptic sector.
Mr. Fadigbe, if we are to rely on the report, from the ministry, it looks like funding is all it takes for, or funding is all it will take for the power sector to work. I know you're aware of the committee that was set up to probe frequent grid collapses, and part of the recommendations by that committee is an audit and testing of existing equipment and improvements in the maintenance of the transmission equipment and lines. That committee also called for significant investment from the government and the private sector. And in response to that, the federal government says that it will collaborate with the private sector in raising a portion of the $10 billion needed to ensure the provision of consistent and reliable electricity across the country. So is that all it takes for the power sector to work, Mr. Fadigbe?
Before I answer that question, that is not all that it takes. But the question I'm asking is this. The money that has been voted before, what has happened to it? Are we saying that for all of this period, there has not been money voted for replacement of some parts of the grid, for maintenance of the grid, such that we can have a blanket statement that the grid is obsolete, is dilapidated, and is populated by outdated equipment? Is that what we are saying? Now, coming to the issue of coming to the question you raised, money is not the only thing. Money, as a matter of fact, money is the least of all the things that are required to keep a grid. The number one thing is ideas. What new thing have we brought into the market, into the power sector? Thank God for the new Electricity Act that was signed by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in 2023. Thank God for that act that has allowed state governments to now participate in the power sector. But beyond that point, what about the manpower holding? That is a fundamental part of it. Do you have the experience and do you have the expertise? Today, in the distribution companies, we have banks running the power sector where they don't have the competency, they don't have the comparative advantage. They are managers of money, not managers of lines, not managers of electricity. No, that's not their core competency area. That is their minor. Their major is in money. Let those who are versatile in the management of electricity sector, let them run the electricity sector for God's sake. Today, we have a sector that we cannot boast of. This is the time that the sector is supposed to be in its summer. Why? Because petrol is now over 1,000 naira per liter. Now, if the power sector were to be up and doing, electricity is cheaper than petrol now. But you still find more people opting to use petrol, opting to use other sources. Is it so cheap to go solar for individuals? Is it so cheap? Even when you come together as an estate, is it so cheap to have a solar farm? It's not so cheap. Electricity from the national grid, electricity from the public sector is still a lot cheaper, more reliable, more dependable than any other one. And for you to industrialize, you need electricity from the grid.
And sadly, Nigeria still relies on hydro and gas for power. How is this limiting the country's potential?
Well, unfortunately, we have not been able to raise other opportunities as much as we have raised hydro and gas. I mean, I know that as we speak presently, our gas input into the power sector is about 85% compared to other sources of fuel. I mean, like the hydro station, for instance, the percentage occupation of the hydro station is far smaller than what we are getting, what the gas-fired power station. So, but you see, even if we are able to develop our gas sector, if we are able to develop the hydro opportunities that we have, the hydro assets that we have, those ones can even serve us conveniently. I mean, it sounds magical that for a long period of time, we have not been able to go beyond 5,000 megawatts from the hydro and gas. Okay, let's close our eyes to what generators, are doing all over the country. So imagine that we have 10,000 megawatts in the grid. Imagine that we have 15,000 megawatts in the grid. Let's take, for instance, that since 1999 till date, how many years is that? Imagine that we are able to generate 1,000 megawatts in addition. Even if we cannot do 1,000, let's do 500 megawatts in addition to what was existing during the Obasanjo period. Between Obasanjo period and now, it's over 20 years that we have been running democracy. So it means we would have had if we do 500.
Not to engage the stakeholders. Let's get this thing resolved. That we don't all like this mess we are putting our country to. You're a banker. You know, I've raised it in this kind of forum before. What are the banks in Nigeria doing? They should tell us. What are they doing? Are they supporting industry? Are they supporting? They're not doing anything. They only sell Forex and make money, and everybody is turning multi-billion profit out of the bank.
Sadly. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Dr. Ayodeji Abdul-Rauf, financial analyst, founder, CEO of Think Startup Beyond Borders, is also president of NAFSAT Worldwide. Thank you so much for your perspectives tonight. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke W using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatuji. Good night, everyone.